The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Think about what goes on here, and let's just use the president's narrative, his birth narrative, as an example. You know, I pointed out in the meeting, how do you know who his parents truly are?
Mm-hmm.
You don't. You're shown a picture, and you're told. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I could take a picture of you and me standing together and start telling people, you're my brother. Eventually, they're going to believe it. Exactly. And that's what this administration does. And I think everything to this point has been an experiment to see how far they can go. I mean, just look at TSA. If you don't think that's the biggest social experiment, they want to see how far they can push us, how far they can grope us, how far they can compel us to follow orders from a perceived authority. Mm-hmm. They're a perceived authority. You know, that's an experiment. And they're conditioning us now just to accept what we're told. And exactly. I don't think it's going to fly too much longer.
I don't believe it is either, brother.
No, I don't think so either. And, you know, one thing that I have a lot of comfort in, if you remember I think Glenn Beck did that whole big march in Washington where you had the God-fearing, constitutional-loving masses there compared to the left and the condition that the grounds were left in. You know, the right side picked up their trash. The other places started to look like a homeless shelter. I have confidence that the people that are God-fearing and love this Constitution will try to persevere without shedding blood. And I really believe we'll be victorious that way. I really do. You know, I know that, you know, it's been said, and it was said in the Founders, you know, that every once in a while, you know, you have to spill a little blood. Well, let's just pray that we don't have to do that here. There's ways to remove these kinds of problems, and we're just going to have to unite and press Congress. If we could get public outrage over this birth certificate, we'll have some resolution. But it's going to take public outrage.
You're exactly right. And believe me, folks, I'm telling you, this document, and all it is a piece of paper, a file that was released, I sat in on the meeting. I seen the evidence. It's BS. It's complete BS. This document is 110% fake. And like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm not about to get into the rest of the investigation for the 2.5 hours or 3 hours that I sat in on it. You know, if your blood isn't boiling by the time this goes national, then you don't belong in this country. I can tell you that right now. You know, go to Cuba. You can join Obama and the rest of his elites and just get out of our country. Leave us alone. Because we don't want you here. They don't deserve to be here. I got a nasty message today on my Facebook account from some idiot, to put it kindly, saying the most horrific things. I'm sure you've been getting blasted by the left.
Oh, you have no idea.
Oh, I can imagine, brother. I mean, I'm not in as deep as you are. Obviously, you're in real deep. My big thing is, like I said, the Second Amendment. But when I sat in that meeting last weekend, my mind was made up. That was it. I'm in. 110%.
Well, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming evidence. It's overwhelming evidence that the document is a fraud, and there is substantial evidence to prove a cover-up. And, you know, and I think as time goes on and this unfolds, and if we are successful in getting, you know, a congressional committee, somebody to further this investigation, I think this thing is going to fold like a cheap suit. But once you take the document out, you know, you got to really ask yourself a question. They have presented nothing to the American people. The American people think they have seen an official document. And real quick, Chief, we went in real quick. You know, that document is built by layers.
Yeah.
The 9th layer contains that green safety paper background. Mm-hmm. And that was created solely for the purpose to deceive, because it's what's behind that document. And that document never started as paper. It's made in a computer. It lives in cyberspace. It was never a hard paper document. It's not a scan of anything. But they made that so they could lay it out there so the unsuspecting public would register psychologically that must be real. It's got that background.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they did it, and that's the way they did it.
And you and I know that, but brother, that's why we need to get this out, because the general public don't understand that. They don't realize that. They think, oh, we're all just a bunch of conspiracy nuts, and we're birthers. We're all labeled as birthers now. I'm far from it. I'm a law enforcement officer for 16 years, man. I have a badge on my chest. I carry a gun. I've been shot, stabbed, blown up, you name it. I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any way, shape, or form. But when I sat after I got done listening to what you had to say that day, brother, I'm convinced. I mean, from a law enforcement perspective, I know what's going on.
Well,
or the general public doesn't.
Right. And when we released the fact that we had a court-recognized, certified forensic document examiner review everything we did and sign off and come to his own conclusion that it's a complete fabrication, that's like the nail in the coffin. You just can't get somebody to do that. These people's careers are out there. And, that just, for me, that made it where I could stand in front of law enforcement officials and make my presentation. Coming from me, coming from the sheriff, there's always an element of doubt. But when you've got somebody completely independent, not only concludes the same as you, but offers a statement at the end that it is an entire fabrication, I mean, they're going to have a hard time refuting that because they won't be able to, but they're going to have a hard time to refute that. So that's a game changer. And if the public ever truly can get wind of this, and to be honest with you, Chief, I need an hour and a half. In an hour and a half, I can convince the greatest skeptic that this is fake, not because I'm selling it, because the evidence proves it. That birth certificate is like the best crime scene in the world. Every piece of evidence you need resides right there. You don't have to look anywhere else for it.
And there is a massive cover-up. Just the little bits that I was able to sit on, there is a massive cover-up. People went to great lengths to cover this up. I saw the videos, brother, and I'm not going to get into the detail of the other videos, but boy, that alone is just that's more than enough evidence, I believe. Just out of that one, you can tell body language. Being a police officer, we're trained to realize a person's body language, how they act, this and that, And boy, oh boy, somebody was really nervous, I could say that.
Yeah, it gives a new meaning to being in the hot seat.
Yeah, very, very, very new meaning. People, you need to be on board with this. You need to give that information out again, Mike, if you could. It's where people can dig up some more information on the interviews. It's
www.mcsoccp.org. Stands for Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Posse, mcsoccp.org, and you'll have all the videos are there for you. If you look up Sheriff Joe Arpaio birth certificate and Google that and put it under videos, I'm sure they'll come up that way too. But it's out there, and we tried desperately to get it out of the borders of Arizona. And it's been difficult. I mean, without national media, and I'll tell you this: national media watched those press conferences. They elected not to air anything, not to do a story on them. And
there's a reason why.
Yeah, there is, and it just starts to really speak volumes about what kind of controls are happening here. And you're not getting news anymore; you're getting propaganda. You're getting what people want to feed you. And I think the Benghazi thing. I think that is, finally out in the open, the way everything is censored before you hear it, the way the lies happen. Our saving grace is these people are amateurs in cover-ups. They don't really know how to do it, so they're getting caught, and that's a saving grace. Same thing with that birth certificate. I firmly believe my theory on that is that got released by accident. They released the wrong file by accident. And when they released it, 120-some-odd thousand people downloaded it in the first 20 minutes. And it was IT professionals, graphics artists that were first saying, there's something wrong with this. It's layered. It does this. It does that. They couldn't pull it back off. It was already out there. It was too late. So they've done everything to ignore it. And then you had the president come out with his little press conference waving, here's my birth certificate. It was kind of like, little Johnny just got past the homework from Billy. And he's waving it around. And he thought that was going to end it. And it didn't. And when you gave it to law enforcement, and Sheriff Arpaio, in his infinite wisdom, for people that don't understand the way a posse works, it's done constitutionally through the state constitution. It gives the sheriff the power to summons up volunteers to help him in any task that he sees fit. Well, Sheriff Arpaio actually has this whole thing organized. And, he's able to put little units together based on professional backgrounds. So he formed the cold case posse by his own direction and instructed that it be staffed with former military, former law enforcement, attorneys, forensic accountants. I mean, he's put a little task force together, and he was able to launch that without charging the taxpayer $1 for doing this work.
That's unbelievable. And I met one of your guys at the conference in Missouri, and he's a volunteer. He doesn't get paid. He's a volunteer. He's a great guy. He's quiet, but he's a good guy. I think he was a little intimidated by everybody there, but one hell of a guy, I can tell you that.
Well, former New Jersey cop, 25 years, only retired a year ago, and now he's back in the throes. But it's a volunteer. So from Arpaio's standpoint, you have other agencies that have spent thousands and thousands training you up, getting your experience, and now you get to come over here, and instead of sitting down on your Barca lounge or watching television, you get to use those talents. You get to use those tasks and skill sets that you've learned for good without worrying about the paycheck. And it works. It works really good.
Or the politics. Now, these guys are all volunteer. The politics, and believe me, people, when I tell you, the politics are horrendous, even at my level. A little tiny borough here in rural Pennsylvania, the politics are disgusting. And I can't even imagine what they are out for Joe. I mean, he's going through a nightmare. They have tortured that man for doing the right thing.
They tortured that man, and Sheriff Arpaio, he is one of the last of the old-time lawmen. He believes in the rule of law. He believes in the sovereignty of the country, the sovereignty of your state. He believes in the Constitution, and he simply gets persecuted for enforcing the law. And they try to use these Alinsky-style tactics on him to get him to not perform his duty. And you talk about politics, I guarantee you 7 out of the 10 hours, 12 hours a day, Joe works like 12 hours a day at 80 years old. But 8 hours of that day, I guarantee you, he is dealing with political pressures more than anything else. It is horrendous, is an understatement, Chief. It's like nothing you've ever seen. And politics has no place in law enforcement.
None.
Absolutely
I agree
no
with you
place
there.
in law enforcement.
And
that's why we have the Eric Holder situation. That's why we have the Eric Holder situation. Is, politics is all over the DOJ. It's all over the FBI. It's all over the CIA. It just doesn't run. It doesn't run. Law enforcement needs to be independent, and law enforcement needs to be an equal opportunity incarcerator. That's what it needs to be.
I couldn't have said it better myself, brother. And they also need to be independent from the government, period. Because, they now have, and I didn't even realize that, they have Department of Homeland Security police officers. I didn't even know that until recently.
I don't know where that is even statutorily approved. I don't even know if they really have that. If you ask me, the TSA is almost like the federal government's posse. It gets its authority, via some other entity. I mean, our authority comes from the sheriff. Our law enforcement authority is conferred to us from the sheriff. And the sheriff sets the ground rules. He tells us as narrow a scope of authority to as broad. So when it came to this investigation, he'd given me full law enforcement authority to investigate this. But once I'm done, I just go back to my life. But that's the same thing that I believe that they're doing with TSA. I believe there's policies, or there's actually there may be a statute in there, in the federal government, where at the stroke of a pen, the president can give every law enforcement, every official in the federal government law enforcement authority.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.